Hello, friends, and welcome to a special edition of Dan and Benny in the Ring. I'm Dan Sebastiano, joined, as always, by the BS Express himself, Benny Scala. Benny, how you doing, buddy?
I am psyched. You know, we got another great topic, and we have two very talented. They're talented, they're creative, they're knowledgeable. I sound like Ron Popeil trying to pitch a Vegematic, right? But, you know, the good thing is these guys are my friends, too. And so it's a great topic and great guest, so I'm good to go.
Yeah, it's unfortunate the nature of the topic we brought to the heck.
Okay.
Okay, what is that?
That's just a different view. That's the together
okay,
mode.
That's new. Who set that up?
I think I did.
Explain to the audience members.
For those hearing the audio-only version, we were meeting on Skype, and apparently Mikey just set something where all four of us are sitting on steps now.
Is this like the Mount Rushmore of podcasting, maybe?
Yes, it's exactly what it looks like. But as I was saying before this started, unfortunately, the reason we're doing a special episode is the unexpected and surprising and sad passing of, I will say the word legend, wrestling legend New Jack. And Benny, you mentioned before when I pitched over to you the guests we brought today. Why don't you introduce who's on the panel with us?
I have our good friend and previous fellow podcaster, Mikey Messier, and it would take the rest of the podcast to describe everything Mikey's into: videos, screenplays, a book which I'm in the process of reading. I told him I'll be doing my review on Amazon this weekend. That's Mikey Messier. And then my fellow senior writer from ProWrestlingStories.com, JAVIER OJST. And when I say senior writer, the only thing we have in common, when I use the word writer, for me, I use Courier 12 font. And then for Javier, it's like Courier 12,000. Actually, mine is probably Comic Sans, I guess, when you think about it. But I'm going to say that, Javier, I'm joining tomorrow the anti-aging clinic of Clearwater, Florida, because I need to live to 183 so I can write more stories than you.
It's all about quality, not quantity. Don't worry, Benny. You do
always
good
tell
work.
me that. You're absolutely right.
You do good work, man.
Thank you, sir.
You do good work, man. I love reading your stuff.
Likewise.
Well, if we can't think of a way to categorize Mikey in 10 words or less, we can always fall back on award-winning filmmaker. How's that, Mikey?
I appreciate it, Dan. Good to be. Thank you. Yeah,
and,
40.
Welcome back, because it's been a long time since you and I have done a show together. I know Mikey was a staple and a regular on our old program. Benny and I had a recent Q&A special where we talked about the story that led us here. So it's great to have you back, Mikey.
I appreciate it, and thanks for having me, guys. And if I don't mention Angelo from New Jersey, he might hunt us down and kill all of us. So I'll say thanks to Angelo for introducing all of us to each other at one point or another. And Javier and I had a great house show podcast last summer. We kind of had a podcast with the audience. So it's good to be here with Javier and Benny and Dan. And today I'm happy to be talking about New Jack, except, like you said, Dan, we wouldn't be here talking about New Jack, I don't think, unless he passed away. So anyone who dies at age 58, you have to keep the seriousness of things as well, because concussions or drugs, whatever led to this heart attack that New Jack had, the guy, I was thinking about this show today, guys, and what I thought of is New Jack has come and gone, and we're still trying to figure him out. We're still trying to figure out his life and his career. Was he good for pro wrestling? Was he bad for pro wrestling? Was he even a pro wrestler? Was he a backyard wrestler in the ring? Was he an extremist? Was he an icon? Was he a legend? The answer might be all of the above.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the ultimate. You see that scene in movies when someone asks an or question and the person answers yes. Is he that? Yes, and maybe more. Benny, we were talking before the show. You had some thoughts going. So why don't you ask the first question to our esteemed guests here?
Well, this first one was for Javier. I read again his great story from ProWrestlingStories.com, New Jack: The Story of Wrestling's Most Violent Man, and Javier did a great job, kind of going through the history of New Jack and how he got involved in wrestling, and even his childhood. I guess he actually witnessed in his childhood his father stabbing his mother. So I'm kind of thinking that, for him, violence was just a way of life. It was a normal thing. He was used to it. And, we've talked before about wrestlers and their characters. So actually, this is a two-part question. This is like Dr. Philip Barbay, I'm sorry, from Back to School, when he gave Thornton Mellon his final exam. It was one question with 37 parts, but mine's only one question with 2 parts. So, Javier, in your research doing this story, do you think that New Jack's character was much different than his real life persona? Was there any difference whatsoever? Because Jim Cornette, I think, made the statement that the trait of a great character in wrestling, it's the real person, just kind of like tweaked up a little bit. And I think in this case, maybe it was even tweaked down a little bit for him. So that's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, when you first, I think your story was first released last year on New Jack on Pro Wrestling Stories, and JP released it again. But apparently, and I spoke to JP this morning, when it was released the first time, New Jack actually interacted with some of the people who were posting about the story. So that's the second part of the question. I'd be interested in how he interacted with the fans, because I'm sure one of the things we're gonna talk about is the guy was definitely a polarizing figure. I mean, like, huge amount of debate about whether, like Mikey said, was he a wrestler? Was he a criminal? Was he something in between? Was he a backyard wrestler? So how did he interact with the fans?
As far as I know, well, yeah, that article came out about a year and a half ago, and I know there is some information on that article that comes from the book Mike Messier bought on New Jack's book, especially the story on his childhood and what he witnessed, the atrocious thing that happened to his mother right in front of their eyes, where he was raised in violence, and he explains that the police didn't give a darn about black on black violence in when he was in the North Carolina area. It might have been Greensboro, but it was definitely North Carolina. And tell you the truth, just when I wanted to do a New Jack story, I was not a big fan, but I saw that he would get so much heat online. I thought it was worth exploring. I said, let me explore this guy. What is it? There are so few wrestlers that generate this kind of heat, this kind of real controversy in this day and age. Let me go in and explore who this man was. And after I wrote that article, honestly, I can say that I've become a fan of his, and I'm pleased, not surprised, but a little bit that mostly the outpour after his passing has been people are very sad about his passing. I thought people were just gonna crap on him, because I would venture to say that if he would have passed away a little bit after his Smoky Mountain Wrestling and maybe some of his ECW run, maybe the outpouring would have been negative and would have been like, "Whoa, good riddance to him." But you know how times change, right? And now I think people have come to appreciate who New Jack was, how Jerome portrayed that character. If it was a character, and as you said, Cornette says that he probably had to tone himself down to be New Jack. That's a really interesting way to put it. And lastly, what I understand is, yes, he interacted with the story before it was posted. Right after his passing, when it was posted, he did interact with the fans, and he said, New Jack is always New Jack. He wrote, and I did it, and I did it, and I got away with it like OJ. I think he was speaking about the coolest incident, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
You mentioned his ability to generate heat. I think Jim Cornette put it best in the Dark Side of the Ring episode on New Jack. He was talking about his time in Smoky Mountain and the gangsters, and he said that they could have brought Hitler in, and Hitler would have been the face in that feud. Like, that's how much the crowd hated him. And you know, I want to get Mikey. I'm going to bounce to you because you have told stories in the past of your interactions with New Jack. Javier is absolutely right that the general, the majority of support for him has been positive and mourning and stories of some of the stuff he's done for the boys and good things like that. But there have been, you know, obviously people that can't look past mass transit and some of the other incidents in question. What would you say, as someone who's interacted and known him on a personal level, is that just a testament to how good he was as a heel, or is he genuinely a truly conflicted person?
Well, I'd say it's both. Once again, it's both. He was, I mean, to me, I think about New Jack's, let's say, in-ring persona, let's put it that way. And Abdul the Butcher comes to mind. But if you took Abdul the Butcher and put Tupac Shakur, half Tupac, the swagger of Tupac, the promo skills, top rated R-rated promo skills. You know, a New Jack wouldn't work in the PG era of WWE, but for the time and place of ECW, with that song "Natural Born Killers" by Ice Cube and Dr. Dre, with the fan base of Philadelphia, he was a babyface in Philadelphia. He was a babyface in ECW. When he came to New England, even after the mass transit incident, he was pretty much banned or not welcomed, let's put it that way, in New England for a couple of years. He finally made his comeback, I believe, in Fall River, Massachusetts, because I was there for this. In 1998, they had something they called a house show, Gangsta Party 3 or something like that, because they had done the ECW Gangsta's Paradise show a couple of times in Philly, and it was just one of those house show names that ECW did a lot. And they did, you know, Gangsta's Paradise 3, I think it was, in 1998. And oddly enough, New Jack didn't even have a booked match, but he made a cameo at the end of the night and came out and smashed people with the garbage can and the shopping cart full of weapons, and the place exploded. And so it's just one thing, guys, I would say, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question fully, Dan, and I'll try to, but we have to remember context is king, you know, like Bischoff says. This is mid-90s, post Kurt Cobain blowing his brains out. People were in kind of a weird mood, you know, like as far as the pop culture, male 18 to 49 or whatever it is, right. People were kind of in this pissed off for no good reason mood. 2001 came and 9/11 came, and it's like, hey, we'll give you something to be pissed off about. But in the 90s, people were just kind of edgy and nihilist, and you had songs like, what was the song by Prodigy with the chorus, "Slap My Bitch Up"? You know what I mean? So this was the culture that we were in, where edgy stuff, Austin 316, Flippin' the Bird, Beavis and Butthead, South Park, all this stuff was pretty mainstream. And for whatever reason, people didn't stop and say, what will this do to the children? The children were dictating that this is what they liked. So New Jack, in a lot of ways, was a man of his time. I don't think the New Jack character or persona would work in 2021. I mean, I think as edgy as wrestling gets now is, you know, Pete Dunne bending somebody's finger backwards. You know, that's about as edgy as it's going to get. Yeah. So New Jack of that time, mid-90s, late 90s, even 1994, Smoky Mountain Wrestling, I watched last night New Jack do a promo with Jim Ross. I'm just, you'd never get a promo on the air like that in 2021. Right. And calling out the NAACP. I mean, New Jack was doing stuff that was hardcore, edgy. There's a promo once again from Smoky Mountain of Jim Cornette offering to manage the Gangsters, and New Jack, in a very serious promo, says, the white man's been treating the black man like crap for 400 years. I'm college educated with a criminal record. Why do I need you? You know what I mean? And it's pretty profound. If that was a 2021 promo, that would be the biggest babyface promo going, you know, with Black Lives Matter and everything else. So New Jack not only was, in a sense, of his time, he was ahead of his time.
Yeah, he mentioned, he tells Cornette that the Gangsters are black owned. You know, he doesn't, and they're not going to allow him to, you know, meddle in their business. You know, they don't need him.
Right.
You know,
and that was I mean, some of his character, Javier, you mentioned earlier the comment he made about OJ in one of the promos where he basically gave a shout out to OJ for taking
Told him
out.
to keep up the good work.
Yeah, keep up the good work. You took out 2 of them, so we're going to keep the trend going.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, Benny. You talked, or we were talking before the show, Benny, and we had our last week, and Mikey just mentioned, it wouldn't work in today's world. And Javier, your article talked about his attitude and how he was with the business. That deep down, I mean, at least the impression I got from everything you wrote is he may have been crazy and edgy, but he did truly care about wrestling in the business, and he cared about the fans, and he cared about all that. I'm curious, Benny, Mikey, you say his character wouldn't work today. Seeing a pay-per-view where The Miz gets eaten by zombies and Chris Jericho is falling through cardboard into an obvious crash pad, would New Jack even want to be in wrestling today?
Well, that's a great question too, Dan. And maybe I should rephrase that a little bit. New Jack wouldn't be allowed anywhere near WWE wrestling in 2021. But guess what? He wouldn't have been allowed anywhere near WWE in 1995, even 1998 or 99. Apparently, he did show up for a trial match, and he never even got into the ring that night because somebody told him not to look Vince McMahon in the face or not to say hello to Vince McMahon. And Vince walked by New Jack, and New Jack said, "Hi, how you doing?" Vince gave him a cross-eyed look, and apparently New Jack was off the card, so he got paid for his trial match, but he never got to wrestle for WWE, and I guess that was 2003. New Jack tells that story. I wasn't there. I don't know if it happened or not. I guess I should just rephrase that, Dan. If it was something like possibly AEW, maybe Impact Wrestling, because you see, was it Sammy Callahan with the baseball bat to the guy's eye socket, Eddie Edwards? So, I mean, there are descendants of New Jack. Sammy Callahan, I would say, is a descendant, of New Jack, for better or for worse. And guess what, guys? I think a lot of it, as far as the descendants goes, I think a lot of it is for the worse. I think a guy like Nick Gage, who, the fascinating show on Dark Side of the Ring, but it's like this guy is getting himself killed. You know what I mean? With these light bulbs into his arteries and everything else. So
right.
I think that with New Jack, like I said, he's come and gone. 58 years old. He's no longer on this earth. And we're still trying to figure him out. We're still trying to figure out, was he good? Was he bad? I'm not sure if I'm going to try to take on this question because I want to get this out there. The times that I met the guy, he was very personable, very funny. I think that's what he had a second life, New Jack did. Outside of the ring, when he started doing these U-Shoot interviews with Sean Oliver, and probably if you guys have YouTube feeds like mine that are clouded with wrestling stuff, and the Sean Oliver guy who did all these U-Shoot interviews with Kevin Nash and Kevin Sullivan and pretty much everybody else in the business around the 2005 mark, well, New Jack just keeps coming up and up and up. And, of course, he must have done 30 or 40 RF shoot interviews, New Jack I'm talking about, and those clips keep coming up and up. So I think what it is with a lot of guys like the four of us and people watching and listening to this podcast, New Jack has this second life outside of the ring as a wrestling commentator. His promo on Chris Benoit, where he's talking about Nancy Sullivan and his friendship with Nancy and calling out Benoit from the grave, so to speak. New Jack telling stories about, quote, the Rats, quote. New Jack talking about the Dudleys. I mean, he had like kind of a Chris Rock, a staccato, kind of a Chris Rock mixed with a Richard Pryor vocabulary, and just funny. So I mean, and I think one of the wrestlers, X-Pac, put a tweet in the wake of New Jack's death. I couldn't help but love New Jack, and that's bizarrely. Even though I considered myself friendly with Eric Koulos, and I went to Eric Koulos's house after the slicing, it's hard when you see New Jack in person not to be charmed by the guy, because he seemed very comfortable in his own skin. He was living the character. I mean, in Beyond the Mat, when the casting director says that he could be a co-star to Denzel, in Hollywood, and it's kind of like, yeah, he could be. You know, where's New Jack in Friday After Friday or some movie? You know what I mean? Why isn't New Jack doing cameos? It seems like New Jack didn't have an interest. You know, like New Jack could have been, I think, successful as a stand-up comedian, or if he really wanted to get into the Hollywood world, do some acting or something. But he didn't seem to be interested. He seemed to like the world of VFWs, high school gymnasiums, the bingo hall, the wrestling conventions, the extreme reunion revivals, the shoot interviews. And I think that's why hardcore wrestling fans of a lot of ages like him and respect him, because he never turned away from the business. Once he was in it for life. And he never apparently left it. For better or for worse, he was there, and he was a part of the thing, part of pro wrestling, and seemed to be enjoying himself.
Benny, what you got?
I'm going to combine two quotes here and then to just throw this out on the floor for debate. The first one's from Mikey in his video about New Jack, which was great, by the way. And Mikey quoted New Jack, who said, "You've got to create something that they've never seen before." And did I get that close enough, Mikey?
Yeah, you did. And you know what? That was me. You're quoting me. I'm quoting New Jack. New Jack is quoting Ray Candy, who was in the Zambuli Express, which was a 350 pounders who wrestled together, Alicia Akeem Muhammad, and Ray Candy was one of those guys. And that was the guy that trained New Jack to be a wrestler, who said that.
Exactly. And then the other quote was from Bill Behrens, which was in Javier's story. And this is what I want us to talk about. Mr. Behrens said, "People didn't want the gangsters beaten. They wanted them dead." And you think about that, and like that was something that you could say about like Larry Zbyszko when he was feuding with Bruno, when he actually got shot out. And, you know, Blackjack Mulligan when he got stabbed in the 70s.
Right.
You know, that didn't really happen after Zbyszko. So, you know, New Jack took the heat to a level where it hadn't been for a long, long time. So I think the guy was just like way ahead of his time.
He wasn't. He purposely didn't want to play the race card, as they call it, when he went to ECW, because he saw that in Smoky Mountain. It's not that he was afraid, but I think he sensed that if he continued that path, his career was going to go nowhere, or he's going to, who knows, get killed. I mean, because people really hated him. He had to travel in a van because they would trash his car, because they recognized his car, and he was in that sense, he was one of those classic heels that people really believed, no matter how many times people maybe explain to the fans, look, man, this is a work, or this, you know, this is part of the show. He did it so convincingly that they just said, no, man, this is real, man. And I hate this guy. This guy, you know, they had this angle where they're beating up on Ricky Morton. They turned the tables around, almost like he was Rodney King. They're like it's New Jack and his people surrounding Morton and just kicking him in the middle of the ring and not letting him get up. And I think they start using some kind of foreign object on his forehead. Really, really heavy stuff. And I just wanted to point out with his style, I think it's important to remember that yes, there's a lot of hardcore, extreme, and those ultra violent matches nowadays, but and I don't want anyone coming at me and saying, look, man, don't be criticizing that stuff, because I've never seen you take a bump in the ring. I never seen you bleed in the ring. But it's a different style, because New Jack's way was like a natural. It was more like a realistic street fight. He just used things around him and as weapons. There was not so much of a setup. Let's put these fluorescent lights on me, and then we're gonna put a chair on my legs, and then this guy's gonna flip over me. It's their coordination. The choreography wasn't there with New Jack's style of hardcore. His was just like a street fight, you know. And I think the purity and the simpleness of that is what people and the brutality, just the sheer violence, the way he bladed people and hurt people, whether they were willing participants or not. That's what people will be talking about years from now. It's like a sociological experiment. People will be talking about him. You know.
Now you hit it on the head, and we've talked, Benny, a dozen times. I know, Mikey, you and I've had this conversation definitely more than once. One of the biggest grievances people have with wrestling today is it looks, I know I hate to use the word, but it looks fake. It's like you were talking about. I'm going to lay the light bulbs down, and then I'm going to set the table, and you're going to lay there for 10 minutes and clearly be part of what's happening. The flippy moves that they
basically
only work.
the super obvious spots, the super obvious spots,
the stuff that only works because it looks like both people are involved. When New Jack would grab the trash can full of weapons and dump them out and hit you with the trash can and pull out the staple gun and even if now, unfortunately, more times than not, the people were in the ring were not 100% willing to take the beating they were about to get, but his beatings looked real. He always looked like he was going to hurt somebody, whether it was safe or not. And I think his style, Mikey, you talked about how he wouldn't survive today. Part of that is I don't think the wrestler of today would know how to work with him.
Right.
I don't think you couldn't put New Jack in the ring with the Young Bucks and have a convincing fight, or someone who's these gymnasts and the flippy shit. New Jack would come in and he'd hit you in the head and that'd be over. You mentioned Ricky Morton. One of his very last appearances was an indie show, and he came out and saved Ricky Morton. And it was, obviously it was a little slower. But he still got a couple of good trash can shots in. Maybe I don't know, 100, 200 people in a high school gym looking crowd, just as much smile on his face, just as much energy as he had in Smoky Mountain, yelling at Jim Cornette all those years ago. I think it's interesting, but I want to expand on that. Javier, you talked about in your article, and Mikey, you've done videos and talked about him before. When he was still alive, even after he had retired and kind of not been, I don't want to say fallen from the mainstream, but if you understand where I'm going with that, he was still a figure that people wanted to talk about. What is it about him? Like, what was the moment where Benny joked earlier about the numerous articles you've written? You when you talk about the ideas that you have, what was the moment where you said, all right, my next article is going to be about New Jack?
I think it was anytime there's like I joke around with Pro Wrestling Stories editor and owner JP Zarka. I joke around with him and I say, listen, it's almost like I there's certain articles, certain figures in wrestling that are just like a time bombs. Whenever you post anything about them, there's gonna be just hate just raining upon them. And we started making a list. Moolah, I've written about her. Lex Luger, people blame her for Elizabeth's death. Jimmy Snuka, it's like, and then New Jack is right there. And I'm like, well, I haven't written about New Jack, and people seem to just always have something to say about him, and they just don't like this guy. And I'm thinking, well, I don't really like his character, me personally. So this will be a challenge. And I just wanted to learn more about him, and it was fascinating. It was fascinating, and some of the stuff was hard to read about. Some of it was definitely hard to watch.
Right.
A lot of bloodletting. But the guy in his interviews, some of the humor there, when they asked him about this young guy, really inexperienced, he wrestled this guy called Hunter Red or William something, a young guy in a tiny show. I counted the fans, at least based on the camera angle. There's about like 15 to 20 people in the whole show. And this is when New Jack just took out like a blade from his pocket, or I think it was a box opener or something, just started stabbing the kid's back. And in a later shoot interview, just researching, he says, listen, I didn't stab him 16 times. It was 9, all right? I counted.
Get the numbers
I mean,
right.
like, as if that makes it better, man. I mean, I'm laughing, but I'm
only
thinking,
single
Jesus, this is the reason why people either despise this guy or they're never going to stop talking about him, and that's what we're doing now.
Right. Speaking of which, and Benny, I'll let you get to the next question. And Mikey, your experience in film, one of the recent conversations that's been happening in the social media world of wrestling is the recent biography of Randy Savage and accusations that it was biased. Even Lanny we talked about it on the Dan and Benny forum. Lanny Poffo mentioned, he said about 5% of it was utter garbage, 20% was crap, and the rest of it seemed fine. Do you think in the world today of the 2021, everything's offensive, everything's got to be sugarcoated, do you think New Jack could ever get a fair shake in a post-mortem biography?
That's a great question, Dan, and I don't really know the answer, because I guess we would probably assume that it wouldn't be the WWE to do it, because New Jack officially never wrestled for the WWE. And it was even surprising to see Paul Heyman get a little bit of airtime to kind of put over New Jack, as a tribute after his death. I'm wondering who would, if the ECW library, as we know it, is essentially owned by WWE, yet WWE never put New Jack on an official WWE show, as far as I can remember. I mean, of course, WWE does stuff sometimes just to make money, so we know that. I think Dark Side of the Ring kind of did it a year before he died, and oddly enough, to their credit, Dark Side of the Ring has honored both New Jack and the Road Warriors, a year before Road Warrior Animal passed away.
Right.
So to me, yesterday for research before working with you guys tonight, I watched the Dark Side of the Ring again of New Jack. I watched it when it first came out, but I watched it again. And I think that 45-minute piece, I think it's about as good as you're going to get. And then you have the fan homemade videos on YouTube. Javier's got a couple in his article he incorporated. I sent Javier another one that was like a New Jack tribute that some fan named Krusty on YouTube made. I think that type of bootleg stuff, given the practical matter that, here's the thing we haven't talked about, that song, Natural Born Killers, was such a part of the presentation of the Gangsters, New Jack and Mustafa in ECW, that when you see the Gangsters wrestle, and pretty much everybody on ECW wrestling on the WWE network, or now on Peacock presents the WWE network, when you strip those songs, all the AC/DC songs, Chris Candido coming out to Back in Black, Spike Dudley, I think, came out to Highway to Hell, Shane Douglas coming out to Perfect Strangers, I think, by Deep Purple.
Mm-hmm.
The ECW theme song, Thunder Kiss 1965? That was both the song of the Pitbulls and the opening credits of the weekly ECW wrestling. They were using that music without license, without permission. Oh, yeah. So I'm not blaming Vince McMahon or Triple H for not wanting to pay the god-awful amounts of money that they would have to pay for those copyrights. But I'm just saying this for the younger fans, you're not getting the full ECW experience on Peacock or on the network. You have to dig up some of those old ECW DVDs, or maybe even YouTube, if people uploaded the pay-per-views or the house shows onto YouTube, or what's the other one, the one from Europe that's like YouTube. But basically, you got to find your bootleg stuff. You can't rely on the homogenized WWE version, because the music, and especially with the Gangsters, if anyone, like the Freebirds had, if you see the Freebirds versus the Von Erichs, but you're not hearing Lagrange by ZZ Top with Kevin and Kerry Von Erich, and you're not hearing actual either Freebird or Bad Street USA for Terry Gordy, Michael Hayes, and Buddy Roberts, you're not getting the full experience. And you're not getting the full Gangsters experience if you're watching New Jack and Mustafa versus the Eliminators, or versus Balls and Axel, or versus the Pitbulls, or versus whoever. You're not getting the full experience without that song, because they wrestled, or they fought, or they beat the crap out of somebody in rhythm to that song. And I was there to see this happen live several times, and it was like hypnotism. The audience was in a state of group hypnotism, hearing that song played to Spinal Tap's 11 on the 10 scale. And everybody's kind of banging their heads in conjunction with crutches getting smashed over backs,
right,
with garbage cans getting conked on foreheads, with a shopping cart full of weapons. Javier made a good point in these garbage wrestling matches that, you know, guys like Nick Gage and maybe even Nick Mondo have done. They have all these weapons prepared, you know, prepared by somebody else. New Jack would take the shopping cart and roll it out to the ring with him. And, you know, years later, or 2001, we'd see Raven do that at WrestleMania 17 in the hardcore division. But the hardcore division of WWF, the latter end of the Attitude Era, was essentially the homogenized version of New Jack and ECW. Right. Once again, I kind of go off on tangents, but I just think about all this stuff, and I just wanted to put over that song and how well that song worked with the Gangstas.
Yeah, basically what Mikey's saying is, if you have to watch kind of non-HD, kind of blurry, lower quality video, but if you can get the real experience with the music and what really did happen, that's the way to go until maybe WWE starts cracking down on all these videos people upload, you know, which are thousands. But at some point they might not be available. But while they are, try to seek out what how it really was, you know, not, you know, even if it's not, even if the network is nice and, well, Peacock is nice and sharper, of course, but
yeah.
You know.
Benny, what you thinking?
This is gonna sound really bizarre maybe, but you know, I'm gonna go based on Javier's last point when I think the guy's name was Hunter Lane in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
That New Jack stabbed 9 times. And I went, when I heard him say that, I thought about, for whatever reason, I thought about Bruno Sammartino's book, and he mentioned in early 1963, Buddy Rogers went out to a house show in Pittsburgh, and Buddy looked out and he saw that, man, like maybe 1,000, 2,000 people, and he counted the house, and he decided that it wasn't worth his while to wrestle in front of 1,000 or 2,000 people, because I guess his take really wasn't going to be worth his while. So he feigned chest pains, allegedly, of course, and got out of wrestling. And here is New Jack, who, I mean, what could he have gotten paid in front of 15 people? And he could have just said, the hell with this. I'm not going to do this. You know, and not only did he do it, but like he put on a show, albeit, you know, probably something criminal. So, I mean, in a bizarre way, that, and I don't know if you guys agree or disagree, the guy was true to his art. You know what I mean?
It's possible he didn't get paid. I think there might be more details in the book Mikey's picked up, but I think the promoter was a friend of his, and so he was trying to help his inaugural show or try to, you know, help him out. It might not have gotten paid, but New Jack did like money. You know, he always said, look, if they pay me, I'll show up. When they started interviewing him, he's like, well, they paid me. They paid me to be here, and I'm here to do my thing. And he was like, well, you know, I like doing what I do, but gotta pay me, you know.
I'm proud to say that I survived a moment in the ring with New Jack, you know, and if you guys have seen my little video, my sit down with Sandman, I was a ring announcer for a show at a place called Club Stars in Johnston, Rhode Island. And I was the ring announcer, and they had Sandman there in the main event against a guy named Astro Man, who was about 320 pounds, real nice guy, and kind of just a very basic, you know, plodding big man, like just a basic wrestler. Nothing wrong with him, and Sandman and Astro Man did their main event, and I think this might have been during that year period after the Vic Grimes injury for New Jack, where he wasn't wrestling, but he was kind of making appearances. And he might have just come up with New Jack to the show to be with Sandman as a buddy, to be honest with you, because I don't think New Jack wrestled on that show unless I'm really blanking something out. But basically, I introduced Sandman as the winner, and then New Jack grabs me as the ring announcer, and having been in the audience for the mass transit incident, you know, my heart was starting to beat a little bit faster, and New Jack just kind of said something to me, like he just said something to the effect of "sell the stick," and basically Sandman and New Jack both got on the microphone, accused me of being part of a conspiracy against them, and proceeded to give me a couple of nice cane shots to the back, and I scramble out of the ring, and I'm, you know, begging for mercy, and then in the dressing room, I did a little short movie with the Sandman, which cost me $80 cash to get that accomplished. For the Sandman, because he got a little bonus payday. And the short movie was made a short movie because New Jack was coming through the back and needed some orange juice or something because New Jack was having some health issues even back then. And I thought at the time, was he diabetic? Did he have low blood sugar? But now that I put the pieces together, having watched The Dark Side of the Ring, I think it was during that year of injury layoff from the Vic Grimes head injury. I think that's when this happened that I'm talking about.
If anyone has a chance to watch Mike Messier with Sandman in the back, trying to convince Sandman to hook him up and try to get him in more deeper into the industry. If we're talking about New Jack, don't know where the person and the character ends, or if it blends, or if it's the same person. Sandman is a kind of guy where when he's working, you're like, maybe this guy's shooting, because he can convince you too that he's a little out there. But the way he would talk to Mike's like, why should I help you? Explain why. I'm like, this guy's gonna punch Mikey. I don't know if they're working, but Sandman looks he really does look kind of annoyed by Mikey at this point. I don't know, he's might just like put out his cigarette. Oh no, I thought if he was smoking, he's going to put out his cigarette in Mikey's eye, or if he was drinking.
He was smoking. Yeah, he was, and you can tell.
He's like, why should I help you? Explain why. Because I'm good. What? Because I'm good. Nah, I'm just. I encourage people to watch. It's just a couple of minutes, but it's gold, man. I told Mikey that.
I appreciate it. That's what I'm talking about. That's what New Jack is in the beginning of that. New Jack has a cameo. He's been in that the whole time. So I guess one thing, guys, I would say is that, after the mass transit incident, I haven't said this on this show before, but I was basically 6 to 8 feet from the ring. And when I get a little pissed off, to tell you the truth, guys, when I hear even someone like Dave Meltzer, as intelligent as Dave is, and I gave him a credit as a pro wrestling historian, Meltzer, and I have nothing against him personally, but he's talked about the New Jack thing with mass transit. Cornette, some of the ECW wrestlers are very opinionated about it. Here's the thing: most of those people didn't have the point of view as it happened that I did. Like, I'm literally 6 to 8 feet from the ring, standing up, because I was in the press section and we were standing watching this happen. And most of the action took place facing me, like the cutting and everything. So I get a little offended when people are strongly opinionated on that night, and especially when they say, oh, the kid deserved it and the kid lied about his age. I always bring up the point, which is more against Heyman than it is against New Jack, is how come nobody asked for a driver's license? The four of us couldn't go to an NFL football game, and if a player was injured, we if we were all 15-year-old guys at the time and said, hey, we want to play football, and they looked at us, we're all big 15-year-old or 16 or 17-year-old kids, and they'd say, sure, kids, come on the field and play football in the NFL. And then one of us got our ankle crushed or got a concussion and got really hurt. That wouldn't happen. And someone wouldn't go to a WWF show at the time, or a WWE show now, or a WCW show, or an AEW show. You wouldn't think that someone could just go as a fan, as an audience member, or someone wanting to be involved and get onto the show without at least showing proof of identification with a driver's license. So I just don't understand why that logical type of thinking hasn't occurred to all these opinionated fans and wrestlers who seem to blame Eric Koulos. Where was the filter? Who was in charge here? The person who always liked to take charge, or liked to take the credit for everything ECW, was Paul Heyman. Yet he didn't seem to take responsibility for the cutting of Eric Koulos.
Well, and Mikey, along those lines, it seems like New Jack got all the heat for that. But number one, like you said, where was the vetting process? Where at least some kind of proof of ID. And I think you mentioned in one of your YouTube videos that didn't Koulos' father actually drive him to the event?
Yeah. And here's the other thing that I took exception with. And look, we're talking 25 years ago or more at this point, but on the Dark Side of the Ring, Chris Jericho in the voiceover says the three of them Jericho's talking about the Koulos incident, and he says the three of them, meaning Koulos, Tiny the Terrible, and Half Nelson, the three of them were asked to attend an ECW event in Revere, Massachusetts. But Jericho in the voiceover doesn't say asked by who. Who asked them to show up? Well, the answer, as I recall, was that nobody asked them to show up. That it was Tiny the Terrible's idea, and this is before cell phones. The internet was still very new.
No social media. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times in the wrestling business, especially, it's a show up at the door business. It's a, you want to work, you show up. So from my understanding, it was Tiny the Terrible who had the idea that he, his brother Half Nelson, and Eric go to Revere, Massachusetts from Rhode Island. And of course, none of them drove. So the father of Eric drove, the four of them. And my basic point is that it was all very spontaneous. But if you are trying to be the number 3 wrestling company in the world, or at least in the United States, meaning Paul Heyman and ECW,
right?
Don't you have an obligation to just business morality, ethics, to check people's driver's license before you let them into the ring? Well, apparently not, which makes me think that the opportunity was there to have a bloodletting and to get some cheap heat publicity, and Paul Heyman seized that opportunity, used New Jack as his muscle, and New Jack did what New Jack does, which is, in a sense, he defended his territory, which was the ring and his match. So I've always kind of blamed Heyman more for that night, because Heyman was the one supposed to be in charge. You know what I mean? If there's a riot at a rock concert, do you blame the band? Do you blame the promoter? Do you blame the venue that doesn't have enough security? I guess you can blame everybody if you want, but in this particular situation, I've always put more of the responsibility on Paul Heyman, because he's the one that thinks he was in charge, or says he was in charge.
So when you say that he was using it, you mean you think Paul Heyman let it slide intentionally because he wanted the publicity of New Jack beating the shit out of this kid?
When he didn't ask for ID, because on the off chance that Koulos would have proven to be underage, then that wouldn't. Then Heyman. My point is that Heyman saw a body and a fresh body, a sacrificial lamb, a big fat sacrificial lamb, and I'm not making fun of him, but he is a big fat kid at the time. So basically, my other feel, basically Heyman saw it as an opportunity to, let's make an example and let's get some cheap publicity. My other thought, to be honest with you, I have a lot of thoughts on it, but one other thought is that there was a lot of New England wrestlers looking to get into ECW at the time. And just everybody wanted to work for ECW because they were more available, or they were more at our disposal, right? So if you were a local New England wrestler, there was a lot of wrestling promotions in New England at the time. And if you wanted to wrestle for the big time, WWF, WCW, ECW was the perfect launching point. And they were coming to New England twice a month, which was a big deal. I mean, they were coming there to Revere, to Waltham, to Webster twice a month for about 2 years. And this Koulos thing was at the beginning of that. So I'm sure that Heyman was getting a lot of people, local wrestlers, bothering him, trying to get booked on the show. And Heyman probably didn't want to book these local wrestlers because he had enough guys already to worry about, right?
Right.
So as kind of I always took it as a message that Heyman was trying to put out. Okay, New England guys, you want to wrestle in my ring? I'll show you what it's like. I'll show you what happens. I took that, maybe I'm making stuff up. That's possible. I also took it as, Heyman, when I interviewed him after that match, after the whole show, said the kid got initiated. Well, if he was initiated, that would imply that he was going to be welcomed back, but he wasn't. And I just took it as a thing where Heyman saw a way, the opportunity to have some cheap heat publicity was presented, and Heyman put all the pieces together and allowed the bloodletting to occur. I'm not saying that he encouraged it, because I don't think New Jack ever said that Heyman encouraged it. But I think Heyman knowing the fact that it's basically an insult to put Eric Koulas in the ring with the gangsters. It was an insult to New Jack because New Jack's used to being in there with Axel and Balls and the Eliminators and the Pitbulls, tough guys, right, who could hold their own. So when you put New Jack in there with this big pudgy kid, whether he was 21 years old or 17 years old, New Jack takes it as an insult. And if New Jack, if Koulas was saying to New Jack what people say that he did, and I don't think that this was made up, but Koulas is saying, hey, can you help cut me and blah, 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 then of course New Jack was going to do it. And he did. So it was a crappy night. It was a lousy night. It took me a long time to kind of process all of the variables in that, and get to the point where I saw New Jack. I could see that there's more to New Jack than that evening. It was a very bad night for everybody, including New Jack, but New Jack had a lot more to his life than the mass transit incident. He had 5 kids. I'm sure that, I don't know, if they were all from the same mother or not, I don't know. But New Jack entertained the hell out of a lot of people and risked his own life to do it many times, and also risked the life of a lot of opponents.
I think that would be a whole new, I'm sorry, Mike, that would be a whole new podcast, I think, to just breaking down that match and asking ourselves, is this professional wrestling? Is this wrestling? Or is this almost like a attempted murder? I mean, is that? I mean, we can go hardcore. We can do a work snug, stiff, and strong style. But is that match? Is that really professional wrestling? Just getting what was it? A barber's thing, or
it was like a surgical. You said it was a surgical.
Surgical, like a scalpel. And just opening this kid's forehead. Is that really professional wrestling? I mean,
no, it's not. And here's the other thing, guys, real quick. People always forget about this part of that match. The toaster shot to the eye socket. For whatever reason. For whatever reason, and I don't know why people harp on, as well they should, the surgical knife taped to the wooden stick, cutting across his head. And to New Jack would always say that he told Koulas he was going to come and to blow out to help the blood pop more when he did it. And apparently Koulas is doing that. But before that, he takes a toaster oven, the old heavy, 1950s heavy toaster oven. Yeah. New Jack spikes it in Koulas's eye.
Yeah, knocks him out. Basically knocks him out. Yeah.
Right. And here's the thing. If this was going to be any type of predetermined, hey brother, let's get each other through this type of thing, you've never seen Ricky Steamboat take a toaster oven and smash Ric Flair in the eye socket with it. You've never seen.
Why are you laughing, Dan? Dan's laughing.
We did see the Dirty Dogs drop a new Barco Lounger on Dominic Mysterio, though.
Right.
Well, here's the thing, guys. Even a couple of years ago, they had that Kenny Omega Moxley match in Baltimore, right? That was on a pay-per-view. And it was pretty hardcore. Now, guess what ruined it for me? Our buddy Jim Cornette went through and dissected that thing and told us how a lot of the spots were accomplished. You know what I mean? But at the time, it seemed like the most brutal, epic match I had seen in years. Well, and nowhere during that match did Moxley take a toaster oven and smash it as hard as he could on Kenny Omega's eye socket. Nor did Omega do that to Moxley. So my point is, although these hardcore guys work stiff, they work really intense, they're reckless at times, you've never seen anywhere else, as far as I know, someone take a toaster oven and smash someone in the eye socket with it, like New Jack did to Eric Koulas.
Full force. It really did look full force,
The fact is, I'm sorry, Javier, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, the fact is, when you talk about New Jack and you look back on his career and you say, that moment that he genuinely tried to kill somebody or genuinely tried to hurt somebody and the cops got involved, you have to be more specific, because there was multiple moments where he faced legitimate legal or civil repercussions for going too far in the ring. And I think that goes to the original point that was made when I was talking at the beginning of the show, is he made it look real. You never doubted that New Jack was trying to hurt somebody, whether they were in on it or not. As we wrap up, guys, I like Javier, you mentioned you could have an entire show on mass transit. Benny, you said, we could barely scratch the surface of what we have to say about him. Benny, you've been quiet for the most part. Their guests, giving them time. What are your closing thoughts on New Jack?
I just think, the guy was a dichotomy, because Mikey, and I've heard it from other people, and that he was a charming guy. I watched a U-Shoot video with Jim Cornette where him and Mustafa Saeed actually crashed the interview. And, you could tell there was a genuine affection between Cornette and New Jack. They hadn't seen each other in a while. So you got this charming guy, and I guess Cornette said that a couple of weeks before he died, New Jack reached out to Stacy, his wife, and New Jack told Stacy that he was happy. He had a nice wife. He had a good life, and he was content. And then, the poor guy drops dead a couple of weeks later. And then on the other hand, you got a guy who bashes somebody with a toaster, who tases somebody and then throws him off a 20-foot scaffold, and then beats a 69-year-old guy, Gypsy Joe, half to death with a baseball bat. So, we could probably spend 10 podcasts trying to figure this guy out.
If you think he'd lose patience working with the Young Bucks, look what he did to Gypsy Joe, because he felt that Gypsy Joe wasn't selling, or was maybe being a little too stiff, or well, supposedly Gypsy Joe told him, "I'll teach you how to work hardcore, kid." Who knows what's the truth, or but imagine what he would do with these young kids today. Just imagine what New Jack, if he got pissed off in the ring for X or Y reason, what he would do with these new kids, man, who are thigh slapping and stuff, man.
I'd love to see New Jack versus The Miz.
He would the Miz will never wrestle again. Remember, he was eaten by zombies.
He'll wish that he was back with the zombies, yeah.
And the Fiend was burned, but he came back, and Alexa Bliss has Fiend powers now. I can't wait till the next episode, man.
Don't forget, Matt Hardy's perfected the art of teleportation. Having the superpowers to change his entire physical persona every time he comes in and out of an ice machine. So, the wrestling world has evolved, that's for sure. But Javier, going back, you had a good point. So, what are your closing thoughts? Any final thoughts on New Jack?
Closing thoughts on New Jack. I hope his family is well. I hope people take the time to try to understand the guy, even though maybe they'll wind up more confused than ever if they try to understand what kind of person he was. But I'll tell you one thing, in his own way, he really did entertain us. If he hurt if certain people he hurt in the ring, if he hurt certain people in the ring, I hope all that's water under the bridge. But certainly New Jack is someone who is worth talking about. I hope his family's okay, and I'm sorry he's gone, man. It was, he lived a New Jack life, but according to Benny, he was pretty much a family man in these last years. Although on Cameo, he did some weird stuff on Cameo. Said he was gonna chase. He pulled out a knife, and if I don't hunt you down with this one, I'll get you with this. And he pulled
habits die
and
hard.
He showed and he showed a crossbow. I'm like, oh my God, this guy never stops, man. But go ahead, Mikey.
and if anybody gets a chance, some fans ordered a cameo for Jim Cornette from New Jack that's available on YouTube. If you get a chance, you guys have to check that out.
Oh, okay.
But Mikey, you seemed more involved than any of us. What are your closing thoughts on this?
I met the guy 5 or 6 times. I'll give you 2 stories. How about that to wrap it up for me? The second time I talked to New Jack was at the night of the mass transit incident, about an hour and a half or 2 hours before that match. New Jack was walking around. I ended up talking to him, and I told him that I had done some local wrestling, and I said not to the level that you're doing, but I've had a few matches. And New Jack said, what's your gimmick? And I said, well, I do this Mad Dog Mike Messier. It's kind of like a Buzz Sawyer thing, like a Moon Dog or a Buzz Sawyer. And I do a Smudge Baby. And so New Jack asked me about those characters. And then I said, I said, I'm not really sure which one I want to do. Maybe I'll try a new character. And New Jack cut me off and said,
then he hit you with a toaster between them.
Yeah, right. New Jack cut me off.
Make up your mind.
New Jack cut me off. And he said, please marry my sister. No, but what New Jack said was, choose your best gimmick and stick with it, is what New Jack had advice to me, which I forgot about until we started doing this show, guys. And then the last time I saw New Jack was at Extreme Rising show, very, in a way, controversial show that Shane Douglas promoted in Philadelphia in 2012. The actual wrestling show suffered because Sabu was booked but couldn't wrestle because of drugs. Just Incredible, kind of the same thing. And a lot of people were disappointed, but if the fans that were disappointed with the show had gone to the Extreme Reunion like convention the same day at the same venue, like it was a 12 o'clock to 5 o'clock thing, and you had Al Snow, you had Shane Douglas, I met Jerry Lynn, Balls and Axel. You know, one of the last times those guys were alive, I met Balls and Axel, and I was being interviewed by the guys doing Barbed Wire City documentary, an ECW documentary. They were doing additional footage for that, and they were interviewing me, you know, just as a fan that knew the original ECW. And I'm doing this interview, and then suddenly there's an arm around me, and I look over and it's New Jack, and New Jack starts interrupting my promo with his own promo, and of course he's doing a lot better than me, and that I just kind of walked away from it, but guys, this is 2012. This is 16 years after the Kulas incident, right? Or 18, whatever, a long time. And I'm still getting nervous. I'm still getting nervous because I'm like, oh shit, he doesn't recognize me, does he? Like, he's not going to say that's the guy in the press section. I better get him too. And then
witness, yeah.
Right, a couple of hours as this convention was ending, and the convention was a lot of fun, to be honest with you, to talk to the ECW guys out, you know, without worrying about their match quality or the stars, you know, how many stars does Jerry Lynn get tonight, you know, just to talk to these ECW originals was a blast, and they were very nice guys and they were characters, man. And to finally, I'm leaving this thing, and I see New Jack, and New Jack gives me like a really nice wave goodbye. Like he's just sitting there, and he gives me like a really like a friendly wave goodbye, and I gave him the wave goodbye, and I remember thinking at the time, this guy's not so bad. And I guess that's what I'm trying to correlate. Yeah, 4 manslaughters, 4 justifiable homicides, whatever it was. The New Jack slicing, Vic Grimes, Gypsy Joe, the guy in Jacksonville. But at the end of the day, dichotomy, like Benny Scala said, he's a dichotomy. He had the worst of them and he had the best of them in the same guy at the same time. And even Eric Kulas said that to me after when Kulas was getting better. He said New Jack's like a split personality. He's like your best buddy 1 minute, and then he's slicing your forehead open.
That's what they say about Abdullah Butcher. They say he's super nice, but once that bell rings, he changes into Abdullah Butcher. That's what I've heard from several people. You know.
Yeah.
Well, when we talk about wrestling and we talk about the minds behind it, the 2 names that always seem to come up everywhere you look, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent, the 2 minds that people always say, those guys know the business, they know what works, they know what's good, are Jim Cornette and Paul Heyman. And everybody, whether love, hate, indifferent, you have to respect their opinions on the business. And I think it's testament that both of them, emotionally broken, clearly bothered, clearly distraught, had nothing but positive thoughts, even with everything Mikey mentioned with mass transit and Jacksonville and all these other incidents. both of them were clearly broken up and spoke of New Jack's passing as a loss, not just from their friend or someone they respected, but to the business. And they understood what he brought and they understood what he made. And it's one of those things that Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette tend not to publicly agree on a lot. And they both publicly agreed that they had positive things to say about New Jack. And I think that's a testament, especially given how neither of them are in any way sugarcoating when they have bad things to say about you. So I think that's the final testament. Gentlemen, seems every week, Benny, what do we say? We could keep talking for another hour and not even scratch the surface. But I appreciate you guys, friends of the show. We're definitely going to have both of you back on as more things go. Javier, ProWrestlingStories.com. Your New Jack article was great. Personally, I have to give another shout out. It's still my favorite. You wrote an article on wrestling toys long while back that still cracks me up. Benny, I mentioned at the top of the show, award-winning filmmaker, author, and professional angry wrestling fan.
Mike Messier, still me.
Still you. There you go. And what's the when we were working together last year, Mikey, you had the Avalonia Film Festival you were hyping. What's the next big one you got coming up?
Well, Avalonia Film Festival 6 will be a return to Ormond Beach, Florida. We had a live event November 2020. We still had a live event, and there'll be a live event this year. So AvaloniaFestival.com, and my book is on Amazon, A Distance from Avalon, When the Dying and the Dead Reunite. Mike Messier and Nazar Germanoff did the cover art, and I'm really hyping my YouTube page, guys. So if people want to subscribe, the channel is literally called Subscribe to Mike Messier YouTube channel. So I'm coming around. Exactly. I'm coming around the corner to 1,000 subscribers for monetization. So if people can help me out, push that subscribe button. And there's so much pro wrestling content on there. And as a cross promotion, I'll put this episode on, and I encourage people that find the show here to subscribe to you guys, Dan and Benny in the Ring.
And that's us, Dan and Benny in the Ring. Anywhere podcasts can be listened to. Our Facebook group, Dan and Benny in the Ring, continues to grow. Finally, Benny decided to invite his son to our social circle. So that was good of you. But gentlemen, again, Javier, Benny, thank you guys so much. It's a shame it had to be this topic that brought us together, but always a good conversation. For Javier, for Mikey and Benny, I'm Dan Sebastiano. Have a good night, everyone. And as always, happy wrestling.
Night, folks.